The gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. Hello again, everyone, and Merry Christmas to you. Thank you. You sound enthusiastic. Maybe you should try it one more time. Merry Christmas. There we go. It's 4. You have plenty of time before, the star goes on the tree tonight or whatever it is you do in your house. Plenty of time. It's great to be with you tonight and wonderful for us to share in this celebration of Christ's birth. I've been thinking a lot over the last week or so, especially about what this celebration means and how we have this tendency to just hold on to those parts of it that are sweet, right? At 2 o'clock in this very space, we had the toddler pageant, which was much louder at this time of the service than this moment is. So I can actually think in my own head. I can hear my voice. It's wonderful, though I love those kids. So in that service, it's just so stinking sweet. And you walk out and you think, well, what is this thing that is so sweet that we're doing? What is this a story that's just meant to be sweet? And it's not. It's a story that's meant to be radical, revolutionary. It's a story that's meant to overturn everything in your life and my life and our lives together, in the world that we live in and the society that we place ourselves. This story is so radical in its nature that it ought to stand to us in stark contrast to the world in which we live. So the song of all the songs that have pointed this out to me this year, you will be surprised to find out is not that Mariah Carey song that just drills its head into your skull, right? It's not that one. There's a new song this year that has really kind of stood out to me. It's an old hymn. I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. Have you heard that before? Right? We actually played it just briefly before the service started. Whenever we get to the middle of this, to what we sometimes call halftime, when we're passing the peace to one another, listen for it. It'll be playing again. I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. It's actually from a poem from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow from the middle of the 19th century. And I want to tell you just a little bit about it briefly, right? In that song, you hear him say, I heard the bells on Christmas Day. How beautiful their song was. It would just ring out and ring out. I'm not going to do the whole poem, don't worry. It would ring out. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. And he says that as he begins to walk along, suddenly, though previously it had given him this kind of sweet joy in his heart to hear the tone of the bells one more time, eventually his head, he just hung in despair. Because he realized that the world kind of mocks those words. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men, or as our translation had it tonight, goodwill toward those whom God favors, which is kind of everyone, right? That the world is so filled, Longfellow would write, with hate and darkness, that sometimes it seems to just kind of laugh at these words that you and I say or that I just read that are so revolutionary in their nature. Peace on earth, the angel said. The Son of God lying in a manger, the story says. And so he begins to hang his head, and the bells ring louder and louder in his head. And he picks his chin up ever so slightly as he hears them sing a new song. God is not dead. God does not sleep. The bells suddenly ring. And so let it echo and echo. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Now, that in and of itself can even sound kind of just sweet, right? But here's the backstory behind Longfellow. Longfellow writes that in 1863, in the middle of the Civil War, his oldest son is fighting for the Union and has just been wounded. Luckily, he survives. His wife, however, had not survived. 2 years earlier, there was a tragic fire that cost her her life. And here is Longfellow putting pen to paper in the midst of the greatest social upheaval that his generation had ever known, in the midst of a country being ripped apart at its seams, in the midst of personal tragedy and darkness, as Isaiah would have said, as he walked in darkness. No wonder he would hang his head in despair at words that don't sound true to him sometimes. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. But Longfellow understood that those words came from a time of deeper darkness than his own. Because here's the backstory to what we just read. When Emperor Augustus was the emperor, Emperor Augustus is the second emperor of the Roman Empire. The first, Julius Caesar, right, had been his father. So 40 years before Jesus was born, his father had been deified, had suddenly been in his death named a god. What does that make Caesar? Augustus, Octavian as his name was, but the Son of God, right? And he loved that title. So he put it on all of his coins, Son of God. And the next thing he does is he establishes something that his father had never accomplished. That in the whole of the world, as far as the Roman Empire was concerned, he would establish peace. They called it the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. If you know anything about the Roman peace, you will know that it wasn't peaceful at all. The Roman peace came at the point of a sword and a spear. It was peace because if you dared step out of line, the Roman Empire would crush you and everyone you loved. If you were to ask any Jewish peasant who had lived during the reign of Octavian what it was to live under this banner of peace, they would tell you that it was misery and terror. And who did the emperor favor but himself and his cronies and those seated around his throne of power? And the whole world lived in this darkness. Enter in a proclamation, not a sweet story, not a bell tolling, but a proclamation that the Son of God was not just for the elite, but for everyone, starting with the shepherds in a field, not with the throne in Rome or with the throne in Jerusalem of even Herod the Great, not with any of them, but with some peasants and a few people huddled together in a lodge, but not in a lodge where everyone else was. That room, well, there was no room there. In a lodge underneath the floor with the rest of the animals. And that there would be peace on earth for all people, not because of the violence that this king could bring forth in this world, but because of the unity and the love that he could shine forth in this world. Everything that the people knew about what it would mean to be an empire of peace or a kingdom of peace was being turned on its head. And you and I are the legacy of that, though so often we forget it. When we hear these stories tonight, when we sing these songs, we are proclaiming, along with thousands and millions, all the way back to those first peasants, that the world that exists with violence and the world that exists to divide, to bring strife and enmity and pain and suffering for the sake of something that seems on the outside like peace, that is no peace, but that a king born with the most humble of beginnings begins the world turning to a new rhythm, begins a light that shines in darkness, brings us hope that picks up our chin and helps us to hear those bells ringing out those carols one more time. That though there might not be the peace that we have longed for in this past year, maybe this year, though there might not have been the unity that we hoped for in the last year, maybe this year, though there might not have been the goodwill that we had hoped for in the last year, maybe this year. Because as long as these songs are being sung by such faithful people as you in a room like this, in a room like there is downstairs, in rooms like all over this world, and in fields, and in small gatherings of huddled masses in places of deeper darkness than our own, as long as we are singing these songs, we are making the same radical proclamation that has been made for 2,000 years. that God is not dead and does not sleep. And though we might not see it always, God is still at work in this world to bring about what God has promised. That is a peace that is beyond our understanding, and a hope that will be fully realized when God's kingdom is made realized on this earth. And that kingdom is a kingdom of love. Don't let the sweetness of this night fool you. Let the songs change you. Let them sink into your heart. That you and I leave this place tonight not simply with some sort of hallmark message on our lips, but with the revolutionary proclamation of a king that would change everything. With that message of the angels, peace on earth, goodwill to all. Amen.